Welcome to Veterans in Transition, where we promote the veteran community. Each week we travel around the region highlighting veteran-related news, issues, and events. In this episode, retired four-star Air Force General Larry Spencer, president of the Air Force Association, sat down with retired four-star Air Force General Lester Lyles in this one-on-one special segment titled, Generally Speaking.
One of the things you and I have in common is that we were both born and raised in D.C. So tell us about your life growing up in D.C. How was that for you?
Well, you know, it's amazing. I know you probably have the same experience. I meet people around the city or meet people around the country, and I tell them I'm from Washington, D.C. And at first they just think, well, you're like everybody else from Washington, D.C. So they'll bring up, oh yeah, I'm from D.C. too. And I start delving a little bit. It turns out they're from Maryland, right, or Virginia, et cetera. Right. And when you tell them that you're a true native of D.C., and not only that, I turned down an appointment to the Air Force Academy and went to college here at Howard University, they're shocked. And they act like I'm the first of the kind like this. So it's amazing. So right. D.C. is a sort of unique environment. But it was a pleasure growing up here, honor growing up here. I was born in Columbia Hospital for Women, which is now a condos for very high-priced condos for George Washington University. But my parents, when I was a baby, moved to the far northeast part of D.C. In the Deanwood area. Grew up in the Deanwood area, which meant that all the kids in my community all went to either Spingarn or Phelps Vocational High School. As you probably remember, if you were academically qualified here in D.C., you could go to any high school you wanted, as long as you got there on your own. And so I took D.C. Transit every day to 2nd and T Street, went to McKinley Tech High School, enjoyed that environment. I was part of junior ROTC because, as most people don't know today, all the public school systems here had junior ROTC programs for the boys, the young men. So I was part of junior ROTC at McKinley, and it was natural to me to be part of ROTC when I chose to go to Howard University instead of accepting an Air Force a scholarship to the Air Force Academy, which I had an opportunity to do. So went to Howard, majored in engineering at Howard, was part of the ROTC program there at Howard, which led eventually to my coming into the United States Air Force.
Was there a point in your career that either you realized or someone whispered to you that you kind of got an inkling of, oh my goodness, you know, they're thinking about me for a general officer?
I think it was my, yes, the answer to the question is yes. When I first went out to Los Angeles Air Force Base, to our Space and Missile Systems Center, as a colonel. I had been there right out of grad school, which was my first assignment in the Air Force. I'd been there as a second lieutenant, working as a space engineer, a rocket engineer, if you will. But when I was called back to Los Angeles as a colonel, I was told by a four-star at the time, and interestingly enough, an African-American four-star, General Bernard Randolph, that the Air Force thought very highly of me, that they thought I had other opportunities in front of me, and they wanted to send me back to Los Angeles to manage what was called Space Launch Recovery Program after the Challenger accident. And so in 1986, I went back out, 1985, technically, and in 85, beginning of 86, went back out to Los Angeles to manage the recovery from not having the space shuttle to launch space vehicles, if you will, and to be the program director for the new Delta II launch vehicle and eventually the Atlas II and the Titan IV launch vehicles. And I was told by General Randolph at the time that there's a chance that you could get promoted to general officer coming out of this. And even with that, I never thought of anything further than just a one-star.
That brings back memories. I don't know if you remember this, but I remember it. I was a colonel stationed at Langley. There was a meeting that we had, I don't remember what it was, but it was at Hanscom Air Force Base. And then General Lyles had that exact same conversation with Colonel Spencer. Yes. So I really appreciate that because I remember that as though it was yesterday.
And I did that because I had that opportunity with General Randolph and also with Brigadier General Fig Newton.
Obviously, in addition to being a mechanical engineer, you were quite a leader, because as we know, being an Air Force officer, particularly as you increase in grade, it's about leadership and leading. What are some of the sort of traits or some of the key things you learned about leadership that helped you be so successful?
Well, that's an interesting question, and I won't go as far as to say being so successful, if you will, but I had an interesting discussion with somebody just recently around that particular topic, and it was about leadership and how people lead. And I was surprised back then, and even today, I'm surprised, even working with the corporate world, how many people think that leaders have to be mean and tough. I was actually chastised and criticized when I was a young captain working as an aide-de-camp to an Air Force 4-star at the old Air Force Systems Command at Andrews Air Force Base. General Alton D. Slay used to tell me that I was never going to make it because I didn't know how to be mean and tough to people. I was too nice to people. When I got to be a 1-star, and I was back at Air Force Systems Command again, this time working for the then commander of Air Force Systems Command, as I was a 1-star. He called me down to his office one day, and he said, you know, you have something that's wrong with you, and something that's wrong with your personality, because you're too nice to people and you don't know how to be tough. And general officers have to be tough. You're a 1-star now, but you're probably not going to go any further because you don't know how to be mean and tough with people, which was a sort of a shock, if you will, particularly if somebody that you admired at the time. And then even when I became a 3-star, I was told by the then Vice Chief of Staff, who was telling me one time that the Air Force would like to promote you to a 4-star, position, but we're not quite sure if you're mean and tough enough. And so I've had this sort of cloud over my head of being too nice. And to me, leadership means that you can get things done, get people to get things, do things, sometimes even against what they may think they're either capable of or what's possible. And you can do it by being tough, but you can also do it by treating people nicely. Sure. And I've always been amazed at how few leaders, even today, even in the corporate world, only know how to be tough with people, and they don't know how to be nice to people to get things done.
So in addition to being an American airman, you're also African American. And I'm aware of your work and your focus on diversity when you were active duty as well as when you retired. But yet today, as much as you worked on diversity and I worked on the diversity, it's still very tough to see much diversity at the senior grades of all the services. Why do you think that is?
You know, that's a puzzling situation, and in part, it's because we learn the same lessons over and over again, and we don't do enough to institutionalize, codify, or really make sure that the kinds of programs we need, whether it's mentoring, whether it's programs like Air Force Cadet Officer mentoring programs, become part of our everyday way of doing business, become part of leadership. I think I've told you this story before, but several years ago I was asked to lead a congressional commission. It was a congressional commission to look at the subject of diversity in military leadership. We ended up calling it the Military Leadership Diversity Commission. I was, as a retired 4-star, I was the chair of that particular commission, the chairman of that commission, but I had 31 other commissioners because we had representation from all 4 services, from active duty, from Guard, from academia, some from industry, retired, and active duty, as I mentioned. And we had a year to look at that subject of diversity and diversity associated with leadership. I went to talk to the members of Congress who sponsored that particular activity. Elijah Cummings, Congressman Elijah Cummings, Congressman Kendrick Meeks from Florida, who is no longer in office. He lost his position in the subsequent election. And actually, the House leader, John Boehner, were all part of that. I talked to each one of them about what spurred them to take a look at this particular subject and to put in the bill that the Department of Defense should have a commission to look at this particular subject of diversity. They all said the same thing. Now, I'm retired, and I didn't have a uniform on or anything. I remember Elijah Cummings saying that we don't know of any 4 stars who are, or even 3 stars, who have made the ranks of 3-star and 4 stars as African Americans. Now, they're sitting in front of retired 4-star, and they didn't even know that at the time. So it shows in part that Congress really didn't have all of their facts together, but most of them were true, as we well know. We studied this subject and looked at every aspect. We talked to industry, we talked to academia, we talked to think tanks, we talked to each one of the services about their diversity programs, et cetera. We ended up coming up with some roughly about 10 major recommendations back to Congress and back to the leadership in the Department of Defense. And one of them was to codify and institutionalize the things that you recommend out of this in terms of various programs, et cetera. And everybody said, yes, we're going to do that. But we knew and suspected that unless you do something that has legs and will go on through the next administration or go on through the next leadership in the military, you're probably going to repeat the same sort of problems over and over again. Sure. And what really told that to me was as we were writing up our report, finishing our report, I got invited by the then Chief of Staff, Norty Schwartz, and the then Secretary of the Air Force, Mike Donnelly, to come talk to a leadership summit that the Air Force was holding in the building. And they had the 4 stars or their 3-star from all the major commands there to be part of this summit and on the subject of diversity. I had to tell the chief and secretary, I said, I have to apologize to both of you. You're advertising this as the first ever diversity summit for the United States Air Force. 10 years ago, when I was the vice chief, we had our first ever diversity summit. And I can pretty well guarantee to you that unless you codify and institutionalize some of the recommendations coming out of this or things that you recommended with different administrations, you're going to have your first ever diversity summit 10 years from now in the United States Air Force. We don't really capture and try to recognize and remember that the leadership is going to change. And unless they remember what happened in the past, or unless it's become part of their policy, we're going to repeat the same problems over and over again. And that, to me, is probably the heart of the problem.
Since the Air Force became a separate service in 1947, there's only been 8 African-American 4 stars, and only 2 of those.
That's counting today?
Well, it's 9 now with General Brown, C. Crew Brown. But only 2 of those were not pilots. You were the first, and I was the second. Yes. Those are the only 2. We are the only 2.
People think Bernie Randolph was not rated, but he did have navigator wings. So he was not a pilot, but he was a navigator.
I've been told that one of the reasons why minorities and women don't progress up to the senior grades is because a lot of minorities and women don't go into operational career fields. Did you find that on your commission that was an issue?
Yes, absolutely. We found it for the Air Force. We also found it for the other services too. There's a propensity on the part of African Americans, in part because of either mentoring or the kind of training or what they see in front of them, not thinking perhaps of making the service, whatever it is, Army or Navy or the Air Force, a career for themselves, to look for what might I do when I get out of the service. And so you find them getting into the support career fields and doing other things than perhaps the operational career fields. It's harder to think of the operational career field, whether it's in the Army or the Navy or the Air Force, giving an opportunity for somebody to be successful in their post-career life, if you will. And so a lot of them just did not go to or gravitate to flying or to combat arms in the Army or the Marine Corps. That is a problem that we recommended something needs to be done about looking at and ensuring that the support career fields are given the same sort of opportunities, if you will, or at least that there's good mentoring to explain to people when you go into the support career field, your chances of getting to general officer at all, let alone 4-star, are decreased because of the way the service has looked at that.
Now, I had the honor to attend your retirement ceremony out at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. I remember you standing on the stage, and I remember tears coming down your eyes. So take me back to that retirement ceremony. What was going through your mind as you were sitting there recognizing that you were about to step out of the Air Force? For me, it was a recognition of two things. One, look how far I was able to come and how blessed I've been to do these things. Look at the people in the audience who, through, I hope, respect, were there. And then thinking about what the next step might be and not knowing for sure what that might be. So all of those sort of things sort of came together. And then I wish that my parents could have had the opportunity, or my brother could have had the opportunity to see what happened and how blessed I was and what their influences did for me. So that all of those things together sort of came to a reality, if you will, while I was doing that. And then, as you may recall, the last thing I did was to give my last salute to those in the audience. And I knew that I wouldn't have a chance to do that again in uniform. Now, it turns out that I did have some opportunities, sure, but all those things sort of came together. Now, obviously, you've taken your success in the Air Force and transitioned that to civilian life. How was your transition? And you've on several boards, you've been very successful, but you're the chairman of the board of USAA, one of the most successful companies in the world. So talk a little bit about your transition and how is it to be the chairman of the board for such a large and successful company? Well, in terms of the transition, one of the things that I think people like me, like you, who were not part of the operational Air Force, we probably had a greater opportunity and chance to interact with industry, interact with industry executives, actually even perhaps to wear a different uniform sometimes. And so putting on a different uniform, a suit, and interacting with others who are in suits was not foreign to me at all. It was almost second nature. So that part of the transition was a little easier. And then just working in Air Force Materiel Command, working in science and technology, research and development and logistics, you work for the most part with industry. And so going over to the other side, if you will, was an easier transition for me than for somebody who's coming out of a flight suit and for the first time finds himself or herself in a business suit or business dress, if you will, and sitting down and dealing with these industry executives who they perhaps never interacted with as a peer, if you will. So that part was relatively easy for me. And so programs like Battlefield to Boardroom, which are very, very popular today. I never took that particular course. I don't think actually NACD had that course. There are other courses like that, but the transition part that they do today in courses like that was sort of second nature for me. So I guess I'm saying that the luck of the draw, if you will, of being part of a command and that was used to wearing a different type of uniform and used to dealing with industry just made that part of transition so much easier for me. Not only were you a role model for me, but your wife, Mina, was a role model for my wife, Aura. And anyone that knows you for any length of time pretty quickly finds out how important your family is to you. So can you talk a little bit about what your family means to you and how they've been a part of your success? Well, my family means everything to me, just like I know Aura and your kids mean to you. We've both been very blessed to have very, very supportive and understanding spouses and kids who didn't, like some kids you read about, they just understood that their father was involved in something different, if you will, something higher, but that we didn't ignore the family, and the family life was just as important to us, and we showed that. We both know senior officers retired in case, and probably even some in active duty,
who don't have the same sort of family structure that we were blessed to have. And worst case, there are a couple of senior officers we know who lost their family members to suicide or other things, if you will. And so to me, the importance of the family was so critical, and making sure the family understood that, and making sure they understood that we knew that, and we held them in the same level, if not higher, if you will, to the obligations we had to the uniform that we wore. So I think that makes a big difference. Not everybody who's had the opportunity to serve as a general officer, particularly at the 4-star level, has been as blessed, I think, as we are. And I have to wonder if in some respects it's because they didn't always give the same sort of support to the family that we did.
There's probably some young Les Lyles that will watch this that are in McKinley Tech or Spingarn or Eastern or Anacostia, or you name a school out there in D.C.
You got to name your school.
That's right. That's right. This is an opportunity for them to look at someone who was in their shoes, that were sitting in the same classrooms they were sitting in, sort of wondering what's going to happen to their life. What advice would you give them for their future?
Well, the advice I give young people, whether it's here in the Washington, D.C. area or any other place where I have an opportunity to communicate and to deal with the young adults who are coming up today, there's several tenets to it. One is remember your blessings, and remember your roots, and remember the people who raised you. And I also tell people that never give up what your dreams might be, because you never know what opportunities might come to you to work in that dream. My dream was to be an engineer and a scientist, and so I've had opportunities along those lines. And in every place where I've had an opportunity to work as an engineer or a scientist, at one point or another, I had somebody tell me that they were impressed with how hard I worked, or they were impressed with how nice I was. Notwithstanding the criticism I got occasionally from leadership about being nice, that was always something that people remembered about me. So I tell people, work as hard as you can to be the best you can be. Never forget that you never know who's watching you. Never give up on your dreams, if you will, and never forget other people. To take care of other people and be nice to other people just the way you were taken care of occasionally, or you wanted people to take care of you, and being very, very nice to others. And so those are the kind of messages I always try to convey to people.
Well, General Lyles, thank you so much for being here. First of all, thank you for your service to our country, your tremendous service. But more than that, thank you for your personal mentorship and your friendship for me personally. You've been, again, a role model, a mentor, and it's clear, and I don't mind saying this, and I'm not exaggerating, I certainly would not have gotten as far as I did in the Air Force without your support, so I really appreciate it.
Well, I think I know you would have, because I know the conversations I had when you were down in the Joint Staff, and when you were out at Tinker Air Force Base. All the conversations I had with leadership in the Air Force, you were in our sights, and they were, and usually coming to me asking me what I thought, but they already had you in their sights, and that would not have happened were you not the talent, the leader that you inherently brought to the picture.
Well, thank you so much.
I was in the Air Force, and there were some jokes made about the Air Force, right? Let me just rebuff some of the jokes made about the Air Force. We all took the same test, right? All right, so there you go. You had the same opportunity to be in it. Don't hate me because I chose the right branch. I get that all the time. People want to talk about the Air Force. Oh, that was so easy. The Air Force, da-da. I'm like, you mad because you didn't get in. It's like I got accepted to the Ivy League, and you got to go to the junior college. Come on. Okay, anyway. I'm a pastor, but I'm not perfect. Y'all pray for me. So I went in the Air Force, and but the funny thing is, I was smart enough to get in the Air Force, but not smart enough to pick a better career field. I decided to become a cop. I'm like, dude, I could have did that in the Army. What? Why would you go in the Air Force? Anyway, so I was in as a cop, and the reason why I wanted to be a cop is because I watched cop dramas growing up as a kid. Y'all used to watch? What's the age in the room? 21 Jump Street? What cop dramas were we watching? 21? That's too young? Kojak? Barnaby Jones? Starsky and Hutch? Kojak? Baywatch? Okay, now look. Have some of y'all seen that movie? They're like, we are not cops.
That's all for this edition of Veterans in Transition. We ask that you like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. If you have a story to tell, reach out to us at vetsintransition.com. And remember, we all have a story to tell. Until next time.